Hardesty.
Here.
Maps.
Here.
Rubio.
Here.
Ryan.
Here.
Wheeler.
Okay, now I will turn it over to legal counsel for the rules of order and decorum.
Thank you, Commissioner. Welcome to the Portland City Council. City Council is holding hybrid public meetings with limited in-person attendance in addition to electronic attendance. If you wish to testify before council in person or virtually, you must sign up in advance by visiting the council agenda on the council clerk's webpage at www.portland.gov/council/agenda. You may sign up for communications to briefly speak about any subject. You may also sign up for public testimony on resolutions, reports, or the first readings of ordinances. In-person testimony may occur from one of several locations, including City Council chambers and the Lovejoy Room in City Hall and the Portland Building. Written testimony may be submitted at cctestimony@portlandoregon.gov. Please, your testimony should address the matter being considered at the time. When testifying, please state your name for the record. Your address is not necessary. Please disclose if you're a lobbyist. If you're representing an organization, please identify it. For testifiers joining virtually, please unmute yourself once the council clerk calls your name. The presiding officer preserves order and decorum during council meetings so everyone can feel welcome, comfortable, respected, and safe. The presiding officer determines the length of testimony. Individuals generally have 3 minutes to testify unless otherwise stated. A timer will indicate when your time is done. Disruptive conduct such as shouting, refusing to conclude your testimony when your time is up, or interrupting others' testimony or council deliberations will not be allowed. If there are disruptions, a warning will be given that further disruption may result in the person being ejected for the remainder of the meeting. After being ejected, a person who fails to leave the meeting is subject to arrest for trespass. Additionally, council may take a short recess and reconvene virtually. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you. First up is communications. Can we read 766, please?
Request of Julie Winters to address council regarding bias crime statute and the protection of transgender citizens. And Julie has canceled their request.
Okay, can we go to the next communications item? I think that's 767.
Request of Jason Wilder to address council regarding Central City Concern leadership and police negligence. And it doesn't look like Jason has joined us yet.
Okay, well, maybe we'll come back to Jason. Can we go to 768, please?
Request of Tristan Sakamoto to address council regarding inequitable and illogical city policies.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Morning, Tristan.
Thanks for having me again. It's always a pleasure to see you. On August 31st, Mayor Wheeler, in response to communication item 728, Henry Benedict, when he questioned the city's approach to the pandemic, replied, "We have to have a clear-eyed, objective analysis of what worked and what didn't work." He went on to mention, "It's easy now to look in retrospect." Those responses resonated with me because you all have an opportunity to do that now, to analyze what works and what doesn't work, to look in retrospect and make the appropriate changes in the name of equity and inclusion. 2 weeks ago, you lifted the city mask policy for unvaccinated employees, and while I want to recognize your long overdue accomplishment, the lingering discrimination is still a pressing issue that I would like to bring to your attention. I will reiterate some points from my previous communications in hopes that you are more receptive now that we all have had a chance to accept that the vaccine does not serve the purpose for which it was intended. In June of 2020, the City of Portland passed Resolution 37492, which states, in short, adopt anti-racism, equity, transparency, communication, collaboration, and fiscal responsibility as the core values of the city. I think there are several things that the city can do to put these core values into action, because this resolution is not just what City Council interprets it to be, but rather the impact it has on those it is meant to serve. Kate Brown lifted the vaccination requirement for state employees to align with our nation's guidelines. Why does the city still allow it to be a barrier for employment? Where is the equity in that? It has become clear that the COVID vaccine does not prevent an individual from spreading or contracting COVID, yet the city still feels it has the authority to make this experimental drug a condition of employment. The COVID vaccination is a matter of personal health, not public health, as any benefit provided rests primarily with the individual, not society. Government officials have no greater moral authority to mandate a vaccination as they do to mandate chemotherapy. You have a platform to take a courageous stand. admit that the actions taken by City Council were impulsive, apologize to those who lost their jobs, those who were overwhelmed with fear and anxiety after submitting an exemption form. More importantly, those who received a vaccination out of fear of losing their jobs, their livelihoods. I implore you to continue righting your wrongs and removing the city's inequitable and illogical employment requirement. Everyone deserves the opportunity to be a city employee, not just those that follow the narrative. Now is not the time to continue the divisiveness that fills our community and our country. Be a leader and lead a path to unity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, communications item 769.
Request of Catherine Lindsay to address council regarding inequitable and illogical city policies.
Good morning, everyone.
Do we have Catherine on the line? There you are. Hi, Catherine.
Good morning.
Morning.
Thank you for letting me speak to you. I'm not going to be as eloquent as Tristan, but I do want to go ahead and agree with her 100%. I work for the city of Portland. I love the city of Portland. I believe we all love the city of Portland, and we want to work as hard as we can to make it a great place. Tristan works very hard. I work with her. And so we're working through an unprecedented time. We are short-staffed, as everyone knows, all across the city of Portland, and yet we do our best. We try our hardest to serve the people of Portland compassionately and well. We are mandated to have a vaccine that does not eradicate a virus. It doesn't stop the spread of a virus. It doesn't reduce the impact of the individuals receiving the virus. And it doesn't reduce the impact on people who are not receiving the vaccine, vaccine, not the virus. The virus has terrified this country for 2 years. And it was especially terrifying back in 2020 or 2021 when we were mandated to receive an injection of a vaccine that we didn't know what it would do because it was not properly trialed. I personally did not want to be a part of that. I thought the risk to myself as a person of a certain health level and a person of a certain age range, I didn't feel that the risk of the vaccine was worth the risk of the potential side effects. I did not know. I waited. I waited until it was mandated that I receive a vaccine to keep my employment. During that time, I was derided as a person who didn't follow the science. I'm a classic liberal, and I very much love science. I love real science. Science is a methodology to finding truth that I absolutely believe in its rigor. And when it's applied properly and not politically, it's a very strong tool. I did not feel that it was time to have that vaccine. I was a part of probably 3% of the workforce who did not want to get this vaccine. And I had a lot of pressure placed on me to receive this vaccine or to get an accommodation based on something that I didn't feel was anyone's business. I am asking you to remove this mandate for a vaccine that has been proven to not do any of the things that we were told it would do when we were forced to go and do one of two things: get a vaccine or get an accommodation. Please remove this mandate. It's not fair, as Tristan said. Thank you.
Thank you, Kath. Thank you, Catherine. Can we go to the next communications item, 770?
Request of James Dixon to address council regarding Arts Oversight Commission check-in.
Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. My name is James R. Dixon, and I am one of the Arts Education and Access Fund Citizen Oversight Committee members. For the record, I address the council today as a private citizen, and my testimony today is not an official report from the AOC committee. I come to you today as a Portland-based performer, director, and producer. I've advised on grant approvals, served on several arts boards, and built relationships with multidisciplinary arts leaders locally, regionally, and internationally. So it goes without saying that it has been an awesome and humbling experience to serve on AOC as a firm believer in the healing power of the arts and promoting more access for our youth. As a Black queer theater maker, it has been my personal mission to create more access out of necessity. In many ways, I feel the same as a member of AOC as there were a notable number of folks of color asked to become members in the latest round. In our upcoming report, there will be many recommendations regarding AEAF data. However, I'm here today to discuss a larger issue pertaining to equity. There have been many significant changes within our beautiful city over the past 2 years. With that change, many grassroots organizations and businesses like our school districts have also shifted with that change. I'm asking that we do the same with the way we manage the Arts Education Access Fund as a committee, as a city, as school districts, and within the Regional Arts Culture Council. With an independent equity review of all data, all contracts, and all standard operating procedures, I believe that report will bring us closer to our collective goals in support of quality arts education. There are also many conversations to be had amongst all interested parties regarding conflict resolution and communication practices. I personally have not had many opportunities to communicate directly to the council outside of when I was voted on last November. So I appreciate you giving me an opportunity to speak today and look forward to collaborating with your offices further in this important work. Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners.
Thanks, James. I believe that wraps up communications. Oh, sure. Commissioner. Commissioner Rubio, please go, and I see Commissioner Hardesty has her hands up too.
First, I want to thank you very much, James Dixon, for being here today and expressing your vision around how we invest in arts as a community. I will say that I also would love to have a deeper conversation about how we can be more intentional about how community members invest. My mic says it's on. The green light is on. I'm getting, my apologies, I'm getting a message saying that my mic's not on from Portland Community Media, but the green light is on. Is that, are you hearing me now?
We aren't hearing you in chambers, but we are on Zoom.
The phone out, screwed it up. I doubt it. He said maybe taking the phone out, screwed it up. But.
Can you try again now?
Testing.
There you
Yep. Okay, everybody's happy now. Mr. Dixon, again, thank you so much for being here. I look forward, I know Commissioner Rubio and I, by the way, I am the music commissioner. You may not have known that. But Commissioner Rubio is the arts commissioner, and I are looking really forward to taking a deep dive and how arts can actually help with healing as we all try to reemerge from what has been a very traumatic 2-3 years. So again, thank you so much for your community service. Thank you for your vision, and I look forward to us continuing the conversation.
Thank you.
Can I go ahead?
Of course.
Okay. Hi, thanks, James, for your comments. I am aware of what you're talking about, and we're really grateful that we had a really positive and productive conversation with Laura about the AEAF. So we're really eager to partner and move forward together in the spirit that you're talking about. So thanks so much for being here. It's important to elevate the issues that you're concerned about. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Rubio.
Great. Thank you, and I believe that completes communications for this morning.
That's correct.
Well done. Next, we will go to our first time certain item, 771. Megan, can you please read that title?
Would you like to vote on the consent before that?
Oh, sure. So we're, let's vote. Sure, we can vote on consent now. Has anything been pulled from consent?
Items 776 and 778 have been pulled.
Okay, great. Please call the roll.
Hardesty,
Aye.
Maps,
Aye.
Rubio,
Aye.
Ryan.
Aye.
Great. Consent passes. Next, we will go to time certain. Our first time certain item is 771. And colleagues, I believe I am the sponsor of that one. Let me,
And I'll just read that item real briefly.
yeah, but please, I just lost my screen. There you go. Please,
Author-
please read 771.
Authorize competitive solicitation and contracts to support critical temporary professional modeling support service needs in the Bureau of Environmental Services for amount not to exceed $15,050,000 over 5 years.
Great. Colleagues, this ordinance comes to us from the Bureau of Environmental Services. This item authorizes the Bureau to hire temporary contractors to conduct complex computer modeling for environmental services projects. This modeling will be done by the contractors, will support BES's work on wastewater and stormwater projects, restoration and remediation projects, development and permit projects, and regulatory efforts. Here to tell us more about this proposed ordinance, we have Shannon Reynolds, Risk Assessment Division Manager for Environmental Services, and we have 3 area experts from the Bureau. We have Jocelyn Tunnard, Budget Analyst, we have Andy Gresh, Contracts Manager, and we have Ning Mao, Modeling and Systems Analyst Manager. Welcome, Team BES.
Thank you, Commissioner Maps. I'm excited to be here. My name's Shannon Reynolds. I do want to correct the record. Andy Gresh couldn't be here today, so we just have Ning Mao and Jocelyn Tenard. We also are here with Rick Nossman from Procurement, who will be, all 3 are available for questions if needed in support of this solicitation. So as Commissioner Maps said, the ordinance would authorize BES to continue to use temporary on-call support to deliver necessary hydrologic and hydraulic computer modeling and associated technical support services on an as-needed basis. These services are essential support functions in planning, design, construction, and O&M delivery services. BES has relied on contract support services for computer modeling for decades, and they are critical to the ongoing planning and delivery of capital project improvements. The existing contracts are set to expire in June 2023, and this ordinance would authorize a 3-fold increase in modeling and other technical support services to support the Bureau's increase in operational needs and capital project work. The on-call support services for computer modeling of BES systems will provide consistent and critically needed resources to continue to plan for and deliver critical infrastructure improvement projects and keep projects on track. These resources will help address the growing backlog of infrastructure reinvestment needs, the increasing number of requests for modeling services from internal BES teams and externally from other bureaus to avoid delays with project delivery. Additionally, the categories and number of price agreements this solicitation would allow provides more opportunity for diversity and inclusive co-bid firms than has been available with previous modeling contract price agreements. The solicitation will result in price agreements with up to 17 firms with a not to exceed limit of $15,050,000 over 5 years. There should be no impact to the budget. We currently have it adopted in our CIP and operating budgets. The solicitation will result in price agreements with firms that have specialized modeling expertise to support critical evaluation needs for analyses related to things like seismic and climate resiliency considerations at some of the city's most critical assets, such as the Columbia Boulevard wastewater treatment plant. BES is experiencing steady growth in CIP delivery. More CIP projects equals more demand for system analysis and computer modeling support. BES is also experiencing year-over-year increases in urgent modeling requests from various city sectors, including Portland Water Bureau, PBOT, Bureau of Development Services, Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. The time to complete a modeling review and analysis can range from a couple of hours to weeks to months or even years of in-depth collection system analysis. Some examples of the analyses we do for the city include hydrant pressure test reviews, construction bypass reviews, development connections, stream and river flow analyses with outside agencies like the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. BES has 11 full-time employees providing modeling support for these requests. In fiscal year 2020, we had a combined 325 CIP and urgent modeling requests. This number does not include modeling support needs for long-range planning and reinvestment recommendation development. BES uses computer modeling to inform risk profiles for.
Excuse me.
Oh, yes.
Sure.
Excuse me, Mr. President.
Yeah, continue. You have a question?
Yes, I do. I hate to interrupt, Shannon. Looks like you were on a roll, and I don't want to interrupt. Could we go back to the last slide, however?
Sure.
So, looking at how the workload for modeling is actually doubling and tripling, why are you proposing contracting versus hiring the appropriate number of staff to actually get you to where we want to be?
It's a great question, Commissioner Hardesty. A lot of these requests ebb and flow throughout the year. And some of these modeling requests are more specialized in nature. And so we have to find the right balance for requesting full-time employees and also just meeting peak workload request needs. And then also hiring the appropriate skill set for what our needs are at the time. The temporary contracts allow us to be flexible in these moments. So while I don't want to make it sound like we don't need FTE, we are requesting FTEs to help fill that gap. The temporary modeling support is needed to fill those gaps where it's not in the city's best interest to hire for a super specialized modeling niche. And it also doesn't really allow for us to expand our diversity of firms in terms of providing those niche specializations for modeling support. So there's a delicate balance we need to try to find to fill kind of all the services that we need to provide from a computer modeling perspective.
So I'm going to push back a little bit. So what are you projecting in fiscal year 22-23 as far as the workload for modeling 23-24? Because if I just look at the chart we have in front of us, and knowing what I know about all the major construction activities and projects coming down the pike, what are you projecting? How many times are you going to be asked to provide this service in the next fiscal year and the fiscal year after that?
So I can try to answer that as best as I can. I suspect.
Yeah, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but.
Sure. I will be completely honest. We do need our workload trends suggest that we need about 5 to 10 FTE to fill the long-term reinvestment needs that we foresee coming. In addition to that, I suspect that our growth will continue on the same trajectory that you're seeing in this graphic. A lot of it is hard to really gauge accurately because a lot of our urgent requests come from other parts of the city. So for instance, Bureau of Development Services, that really depends on how many requests they're getting and how many we need to evaluate. Any changes from BPS to zoning codes, for example, impacts our workload. And those are really hard for us to work into our trajectories for how we see demand for modeling services. What I can tell you is that it is increasing and it doesn't look like it's going to slow down anytime soon.
That would be what I would interpret from the chart that you've shown me, and I would be very interested to see how we could gradually add FTE to address these emerging needs. And let me just say, my concern is that we'll continue in this cycle. And who supervises 17 contracting firms?
Well, so we currently have our, my supervising engineer, Ning Mao, would be managing quite a bit of it, but we also would be balancing that with Jocelyn's support and help within our integrated planning group.
I appreciate you taking the time, Shannon, and if you weren't the right person, please have someone follow up with me, because this is a tragic trend that I continue to see here at the City of Portland. So I really look forward to getting more information and unpacking this before it comes up for a vote. Thank you.
And Shannon, before you resume your presentation, I want to jump in here and thank Commissioner Hardesty for her comments and observations. I completely agree with you. And I'll tell you, on this contract and a couple of others that are coming down the pike, I've asked the Bureau to do some strict scrutiny about when we contract versus when we go and hire permanent staff. My preference is to hire permanent staff when it's going to save us money. I think that's both cost efficient and more equitable. We have a project underway where we're reviewing literally all of these temporary contracts, which are about to come before council, and I'm excited to say that you will see some of these contracts look very different in the near future than you have seen in the past. And I want to thank the Bureau and Shannon for them helping us move in that direction. And I will take you up on that offer to provide you with some information about how the Bureau is thinking about the balance between contractors and permanent employees. I think this is an important discussion for our infrastructure bureaus and the entire city.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Shannon, I apologize for the interruption. Please continue.
So BES uses computer modeling to inform risk profiles for a $21 billion asset portfolio as a proactive tool to identify risk in our systems early and to initiate planning and solution efforts before they become emergencies. We also use the information that is generated from these tools to identify where there may be inequities in the risks in our systems and how we address them. We use this information also to have rich discussions about what risks are acceptable and which are not. These tools are also helpful in developing, helpful and relied upon to help develop long-term recommendations for improvement strategies to our infrastructure. As part of the solicitation, we will work with procurement to develop an outreach strategy to encourage COVID and DMW ESB firms to apply.
Shannon,
Sure.
I see that Commissioner Ryan has his hand up. Commissioner Ryan, do you want to jump in here now, or?
Yeah, just a real quick, if you go back to the last slide, I like this slide, but there's a part of it that's missing for me. After assessment, planning, solutions is like implementation and delivery. Mm-hmm. And then in maintenance, there should be an evaluation of what we did, and so we can learn from that and then improve it next time we do it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Completely agree.
It's just a part of improvement. So
Yep.
That's all.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Ryan. Shannon, please continue.
So the RFP categories were crafted to enable smaller, specialized, and COVID certified firms to bid. We expanded the scope, number, and variety of price agreements to create opportunities for diversity of firms to contract with BES, which is something we didn't have in the last series of price agreements for this type of work. So the final comments, this request is consistent with past and ongoing scope and utilization of previous price agreements for temporary computer modeling support services. It supports BES computer modeling workloads for long-term planning, CIP project delivery, regulatory compliance needs, and various modeling service requests. It helps avoid cost delays and supports a proactive reinvestment environment. And it enhances workforce development, diversity, and recruitment efforts and opportunities. I really appreciate your time and comments. Do you have any further questions for me?
Commissioner Ryan, is your hand up intentionally?
No, I forgot it was up, but I just have a comment perhaps. I really appreciate the presentation. I think, Commissioner, my question is where's the why on this one? So is the why that there's a backlog? Is the why that there's extreme climate events that are putting pressures on this. So it felt more tactical than getting into the bottom line.
Sure. Shannon, do you want to
And
take a
it could be that I just wasn't picking up on
Oh,
it.
no. Well, let me give a quick and dirty answer, and then I'll refer it to staff who can give you the correct answer. We're bringing this forward now because, number one, this is a very specialized skill. This is one of the reasons why this is a contract instead of permanent staff. We're looking for folks who can do very complex computer modeling that we don't use that often, but when we need it, we really need it. The other thing which is happening is the number of big infrastructure projects that we have in the pipeline right now are increasing almost exponentially at this point. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to bring on new staff to take care of these specialized projects, but the volume of new infrastructure projects that are on our capital improvement plan are increasing quite quickly. And with that, I'll actually ask Shannon to clean up my answer. How would you answer that, Shannon?
Sure. So I think you got it 90% right. I think one part that maybe is missing is our CIP delivery process is reliant on modeling services to help develop, design alternatives, sizing, all of that. So it's that we've expanded the scope in some ways to allow for and be more flexible as a bureau to respond to what Commissioner Maps just said, our planning needs and our long-term reinvestment needs and risk evaluations. And that includes big things like seismic and climate change issues. So that's one thing. I don't want to underestimate the dependency we have to continue to provide CIP support services through our modeling contracts. Our existing price agreements end in June of 2023. If we let that expire without replacing them, our ability to support CIP and all of the other modeling services requests will substantially reduce. And so that has a huge impact on adding to our backlog, our already existing backlog.
Shannon, that context is just what I needed. Thank you so much.
Megan, is anyone signed up to testify on this item?
Mr. President.
Yep. Sure, please.
Shannon, that was really helpful information. Thank you. For me, it makes sense to think backwards. At the end of 10 years from today, we will have completed X number of capital projects. The workforce we will need to get those projects accomplished will be X, right? Again, when you're talking about 14 contractors, somebody has to supervise them. And what we typically do is have the city workforce actually supervise people who have been hired under contract at significantly more money than the city employees are being paid to do the same work. So I do see this as an equity issue, and I also see it about how we lack really long-term planning here at the city as far as how we invest our limited resources today to get the outcomes we want tomorrow. So again, I really appreciate your conversation, your presentation. This has been a really good conversation. I will say your bureau is certainly not the only bureau that is over-reliant on contractors and then using city employees to supervise and in some cases undo the poor work that was done by those contractors. So this is a bigger conversation than just a BES conversation, but I'm grateful that we're starting somewhere with this conversation in the city of Portland. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Hardesty. Colleagues, any further discussion on this item? Megan, do we have any public testimony on this item?
No one signed up.
Okay. Well, this is the first reading of a non-emergency ordinance. It moves to a second reading. And colleagues, I just want to appreciate all of you for your feedback on this item. I believe the issues that Commissioner Hardesty brought up are very important. I look forward to engaging with them over at BES, and frankly, I will have some contracting ordinances coming forward, and in those items, I think you'll see us reflect some of the values that Commissioner Hardesty articulated. And now, let's go to our next time certain, 772 and 773. Megan, can you please read those two items together?
772, amend business license law code related to the apportionment and allocation of income. 773, amend business license law code related to administrative and housekeeping changes.
Thanks, Megan. Also, I'll have to say, I'm not sure if your mic is working in chambers either. I'll let you poke at that as I tell my colleagues about these next two items. Colleagues, we're about to learn about two proposed ordinances. Item 772 updates the way the city apportions business income from services and aligns those processes to conform with the state of Oregon. Multnomah County and Metro taxing jurisdictions are also moving forward with similar changes. These changes are expected to be revenue neutral. However, by reducing the differences between local and state business taxes, 772 will increase compliance and reduce administrative burdens for taxpayers. Today, Council will also review item 773, which updates the agreements between first, the City of Portland and Metro, and second, the City of Portland and Multnomah County. These updates clarify how income taxes for the supporting housing services and preschool for all will be administered. In particular, item 773 expands the scope of the Revenue Division's appeal board and improves clarity for both the Revenue Division and taxpayers on issues like the imposition of the tax and how corresponding protests and appeals are resolved. Now, we are fortunate to have the city's Deputy Chief Financial Officer and Revenue Division Director, Thomas Lanham, and Revenue Division Policy Analyst, Don Jones, who will present both proposals together and answer any questions that you may have. Thomas and Don, thank you for being here this morning. The floor is yours.
Good morning, Commissioner Mapson and City Council. I'm Thomas Lanham. I'm the Revenue Division Director, and joining me is Don Jones, Policy Analyst. And Commissioner Maps, that may have been the best introduction I have ever heard to any ordinance ever. Especially tax ordinances, which tends to get a little convoluted. So we'll kind of try to keep this pretty straightforward today. As Commissioner Maps said, there are two ordinances before you today. The first, item 772, is a substantive change to the way the Revenue Division apportions business income taxes, business income for tax purposes under the city's business license law. In brief, our current apportionment rule allocates taxable income based on where income producing activities occur. This is called cost of performance sourcing, and it mostly pertains to where service-based employees physically perform their work. The ordinance would change the income apportionment to the market-based sourcing approach, which allocates taxable income based on where sales occur, and as the commissioner said, matches the state of Oregon's apportionment rule adopted in 2018. Revenue has worked closely with Metro and Multnomah County and the Portland Business Alliance on this change, and it has strong support. The change goes into effect for tax years beginning on or after January 1st, 2023, only if all three jurisdictions approve it. Metro and Multnomah County councils will soon be considering matching code amendments following council's decision today. We work closely with economists at the city, the county, and Metro, and anticipate no material change in local tax receipts following this change. And this is because locally based service businesses with sales outside of Portland will generally enjoy some tax relief, while businesses located outside of Portland with Portland sales are expected to generally pay more. And of course, the actual impact would depend on specific taxpayer circumstances. And I think I misspoke a moment ago. This is a first reading, unless I'm mistaken. So it wouldn't actually be decided today. The second item, item 773, is a housekeeping ordinance for minor needed changes to the business tax code. Commissioner Mapp summed up very well. And Don will walk you through just a handful of slides here on these two changes for a little more detail. Go ahead, Don.
You're on mute, Don. Uh-oh. Don, I don't know if you can hear me, but you're on mute.
Sorry about that.
No problem. We didn't get any of that, so please start from the beginning.
Okay. I'm Don Jones, a policy analyst with the Revenue Division, and this ordinance proposes conforming the business license tax to Oregon's apportionment methods. The focus is on changing to market-based sourcing for service-based income. Next slide, please. The city collects business taxes for Metro Multnomah County and the city. Before 2018, the state and tax jurisdictions used cost of performance to source service-based income. The state changed and began using market-based sourcing in 2018, and we did not. The professional service sector makes up 0.2%, or 1 in 500, of the city's taxpayers. The difference between these two apportionment methods places a larger compliance burden on businesses. It requires them to track different information for the state and for the city. The difference also limits our use of state tax return information in our compliance work. Next slide, please. Conformity is not required. However, it will reduce the compliance burden on businesses and enhance our ability to use state tax data to enforce local codes. The tax jurisdictions have discussed the conformity proposal and agreed to implement these changes. We reached out to the business community for comment. The comments received were supportive of the changes. And as Thomas said, the revenue is not expected to change materially as a result of this proposal. Next slide, please. Cost of performance applies to income from the sales of services, sourcing that income to the tax jurisdiction where income producing service activity is being performed by the employees of a company. Market-based sourcing changes this, generally sourcing that income to the tax jurisdiction where the customer is located. This change may reduce the tax paid by a service business located in the tax jurisdiction and increase the tax paid by a service business located outside the tax jurisdiction. Moving to market-based sourcing for this income type will align with the state and reduce burdens on Portland businesses in two ways. By reducing the type of data businesses are required to track from the two different types of data to merely a subset of the same data currently tracked for state tax purposes. And then by reducing the tax burden for some local businesses, shifting that to outside businesses. Next slide, please. This example contrasts a local law firm with an out-of-state law firm and reflects the general expectation. Results will vary based on individual taxpayer circumstances. In this example, the Portland law firm performs 97% of its income producing activity in Portland, but only 90% of its customers are in Portland. And by moving to market-based sourcing, it reduces its income assigned to Portland by $14,000. Whereas the San Francisco law firm performs 0.5% of its income producing activity in Portland, but 5% of its customers are located in Portland. Moving to market-based sourcing increases its income assigned to Portland by $54,000. Next slide, please. Another element of conformity is a federal law, Public Law 86-272. Market-based sourcing already applies to businesses selling physical products with one carve-out based on this federal law. The federal law protects a business selling physical products into a state from taxation by that state when the business's only activity in the state is limited to the activity of asking a customer to buy its product. The federal law applies on an interstate basis, and the city currently applies this law on an intrastate basis. As currently applied by the city, it allows a Medford or Bend manufacturing or wholesale business to avoid paying the city's business license tax on income from sales to Portland customers. It also allows California-based manufacturing or wholesale businesses to avoid paying the city's business license tax on income from sales to Portland customers by locating a warehouse just outside the city limits. Moving back to the federal interstate standard allows market-based sourcing to be applied to more of these sales of physical products made to Portland customers. And that's the end of this presentation. If we could bring up the housekeeping presentation, please. Thank you. This ordinance proposes certain housekeeping changes. Next slide, please. With the administration of the new tax programs, we expect an increase in compliance activities and an increase in the number of protests and appeals. These changes will allow the Revenue Division to more effectively administer the new and existing programs. The proposed changes allow delivery of Revenue Division notices by electronic means in addition to or instead of using first-class mail if a taxpayer agrees to electronic communication. It also makes a clear statement on the imposition of the business license tax and corrects a citation to an Oregon administrative rule number that changed when the state updated their rule numbering scheme for the state's Department of Revenue. And finally, it updates the taxpayer protest provisions to increase the Revenue Division's time for responding to an appeal from 30 days to 180 days. It clarifies when a determination is appealed to the Revenue Division versus to the Appeals Board. Thank you. Any questions?
Colleagues, any questions? We can ask for, let's start with do we have any public testimony?
We have two individuals.
Great.
First up, we have Andrew Hone.
Oh, great. Welcome, Andrew. Is Andrew here?
Yes, Andrew's just,
There we go.
All right, I think you have me. So good morning, everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to speak here. My name is Andrew Hone, President and CEO of the Portland Business Alliance. And I do want to second what Thomas said. Commissioner, that was a great introduction, and I hope you are as fired up and as riveted as I am by this tax presentation today. And I want to express our very strong support for these ordinances and to commend and really thank Thomas Lanham, the entire staff, the Bureau staff, for their excellent work, and for you, commissioners, for considering these ordinances. They really represent over a year of work between the region's largest local governments and the business community to simply make compliance with the region's three taxes as simple and customer friendly as possible by aligning their rules and their calculation methods with the way that the state of Oregon does it. And as you are very well aware, Portland, the area, in fact, is losing employers right now. And one of the reasons for this is the number of new taxes and tax increases that have been enacted over the past 4 years. And Portland now, as I know most of you know, has the highest local personal income tax burden in the nation. And the city of Portland, Multnomah County, and the Metro Homeless Services programs are really dependent on business taxes. And we've worked with all of you to pass these taxes and to help them to be the most supportive of the business community to pay for the things that we care for. If we do not take actions to mitigate the impacts of these new taxes and what they are having on the business community, then ultimately the revenue generated by business taxes will decline and critical services will be threatened. The two ordinances before you today, by making compliance simple and customer friendly, will help considerably with these challenges. They also have the benefit of making the collection and processing of these taxes, all of which are managed by the Portland Revenue Bureau across 3 governments, simpler and more efficient for Director Lanham and the Bureau staff. The two ordinances align the city's rules and methods used to calculate tax obligations with the state of Oregon's rules and methods. And more importantly, they shift the city of Portland from the current system, which only tax businesses located in the city, to a method that taxes business activity within the city, regardless of the location of the business. This change means that the local business community will pay somewhat less, as you've seen in the presentation, and entities who conduct business in our city but are located out the city will pay their fair share. You heard the presentation, the example of the law firm, and really this is about leveling a playing field between out-of-state firms, out-of-location firms, and local businesses. This changes has the benefit of not only being positive for our local employer community, but it will not reduce revenues. And I want to be clear, this is perhaps a point of divergence. If the city's experience follows the state of Oregon, it will likely increase revenue, making it a true triple win. And by way of example, during 2019 in the Oregon revenue forecast, the state economist explained a steep increase in corporate income tax collections for over 15 years, and ruling out a number of other circumstances predicated that increase was based on the switch to market-based sourcing. So in closing, what you have before you now is a true win-win for governments, for the private sector, and for the services that we all depend on. Thank you for your time. Thank you to the Revenue Bureau for their work. And of course, I'm happy to take any questions.
Colleagues, any questions for our speaker? No. Megan, do we have any other public testimony?
Next, we have Robert Butler.
Welcome, Robert. Is Robert in the Zoom room?
Robert, are you able to unmute?
I think, am I unmuted now?
Yes, you sure are. We can hear you loud and clear.
Oh, thank you. And good morning, our underpaid, hardworking city council. I'm Robert Butler, Portland native. I'll say, first of all, shame on the Portland Business Association. I can't imagine such propaganda and misinformation, but the problem here is, if you're a real estate agent, as I understand it, and you sell a property in Washington to a Portland resident, regardless of where their business is, and it's not clear in this code, is it where the residence is of the person receiving the service or where the business is that's receiving the service? Don't know that. But it sounds like you're changing the law, which forever has been the taxes attributable to where the property is located, and the taxing agency is the jurisdiction where that occurs. So this looks like a change. I would call into PMAR to see if they're aware of this surprise. I don't know. But let's get back to the real problem of this, and that is the inequity of the current tax code, particularly where it benefits the city of Portland. And Portland is the only city in the United States that asks the question, are you a small tax, a small company or a large company, by how much share in stock you own, 5% or more. And then you have 2 different tax structures called owner's compensation lid, depending upon how much stock you own. So if you're a small employer, you're getting totally screwed by the city of Portland, who's getting a windfall. Same thing with loss carry forward. The only city in Oregon that denies you a loss carry forward if you ever have a year of no revenue is Portland. And so what they do is, if you have a 0 revenue, they eliminate all of your former loss carry forwards. Why? Just so they get you off guard and treat you like no other city in Portland. So for inequity and unjust and exclusion of small business, this is hypocrisy. And before we screw the realtors anymore, we should talk about equity for small business, which this city council refuses to do. And so I'm sorry, but shame on the Portland Business Alliance for this propaganda. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Robert. Megan, do we have any more public testimony?
That concludes testimony.
Colleagues, any discussion or questions from the floor? Seeing none, I believe this. Oh, let's see. I think this is a first reading. Where are we? This is a first reading of a non-emergency ordinance. It moves to a second reading. Great. And
Excuse me, Mr. President.
Yes.
I just wanted to take a moment to really appreciate Thomas Landon's leadership around this issue. If, in fact, I understood only half of what he said.
I understand.
Right? But what I will tell you is if he was not someone with the integrity that he brings to his job and the respect that the industry has for him, this council chamber would be filled from top to bottom with angry community members. And so I just wanted to, because they won't be here next week, to take a moment to thank Don Jones and Director Lanham for his continued leadership of revenue. It is the one area that I have the least concerns about, and I got a lot of concerns within the city of Portland, but I rest assured if Thomas Lanham brings something to us, I can take it to the bank. So, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hardesty. And I think I saw a couple other hands come up.
Yeah.
Take off your unmuted your
I did
computer.
that. Sorry.
That's all right.
Just kind of waking everyone up a bit. Also, I want to, thanks for reminding me that Robert won't be there. Sometimes in first readings, when things are actually crystal clear, it's easy for us to just be quiet. And I also really appreciated the way this was laid out. Just your simple framing, which was very helpful. One is about conformity. Let's line up with the state. Let's be good partners since we're the revenue division, if you will, for all of local government. And then the second one is housekeeping, which many times when we have these pairings, the second one often is housekeeping. But anyway, I don't always hear it framed in such a simple way, and it's very refreshing. Thank you, Robert, for being here this morning.
Great. I want to thank my colleagues for their thoughtful comments on that item. I also appreciate staff presentation. Just to wrap up where we are on that, that was the first reading of a non-emergency ordinance. It moves to a second reading. We will go to our next time certain. Item 774. Megan, can you please read that item?
Accept the Police Accountability Commission quarterly report for April through June 2022.
Great, thank you. And Megan, I will mention that your mic, I don't know if our internal systems are picking up your microphone, but we'll just move on, and I see staff is here to help you. Welcome. Colleagues, we're about to hear a presentation on the Police Accountability Commission's second quarterly report. I'm pleased to welcome Samir Kanal and Mike Myers from the Community Safety Division to present on this item. Welcome, gentlemen.
Well, good morning, Council President and Commissioners. For the record, I am Mike Myers, the Community Safety Transition Director for the City of Portland. I am here today in reference to Council Agenda Item number 774 to accept the Police Accountability Commission quarterly report for April through June 2022. In fulfillment with the requirements of Resolution 37548 to establish a commission to write rules, definitions, procedures, and other necessary details for recommendation to Council for the new police oversight system authorized by voters on November 3rd, 2020 general election. The Police Accountability Commission hereby submits the quarterly report, which highlights the project status of the Police Accountability Commission for the second quarter of 2022, that's April 1st through June 30th. With me today are guests and members from the Police Accountability Commission and Samir Kanal, the project manager for the Police Accountability Commission, to make comment on this item.
Great.
Samir?
Thank you. Good morning, members of council, members of the public watching. Samir Kanal, supporting staff analyst for the Police Accountability Commission. I'm joined by the three co-chairs of the Police Accountability Commission, Co-Chair Lavisa Lloyd, who is on over Zoom, Co-Chair Simab Husseini, and Co-Chair Faith Aiken, who are here in council chambers. I'll pass it over to them at this time to present the quarterly report.
Thanks. Welcome.
Thank you to City Council for allowing us the opportunity to present the quarterly report of the Police Accountability Commission for April to June 2022. My name is Faith Aiken. I use she, her pronouns. I am joined by my two co-chair colleagues, Simab Husseini and Lavisa Lloyd on Zoom. We are all members
Excuse me, it doesn't appear that the slideshow is showing up, but.
There you go.
Thank you. We are all members of the Police Accountability Commission appointed by the City Council, and we are the co-chairs of the Police Accountability Commission during this, the fact-finding phase of work, the first half of which is covered by this quarterly report. Today, we will be providing a brief overview of the quarterly report and the work the Commission has done from April 1st through June 2022. Future quarterly reports will cover more recent activities, and members of the Commission will return to present July to September quarterly report in late October or early November.
I just want to say thank you so much to the City Council. My name is Lavisa Lloyd. I use she and her pronouns. I'm a co-chair of the Police Accountability Commission for the fact-finding phase.
Mr. President,
Yes.
are we using a slideshow?
Yeah.
Okay, because it's not, it went backwards, I think.
I'll ask staff to confirm that we're on the right slide.
We are.
Okay, great. Thanks, Samir.
The Zoom issue here for Co-Chair Lloyd.
Oh, sure. Okay. I'll go ahead. In November of 2020, 82% of Portland voters supported the creation of Charter Section 210, which creates a new board to replace both the current system of administrative investigation, discipline, and accountability, and to allow for a greater community voice in changing the policies and directives of Portland Police. The Police Accountability Commission was created by the City Council to develop the parameters and details of the Community Police Oversight Board authorized under this charter section. From December 2021 through March 2022, the Commission was convened and worked through its organizational phase. This progress was addressed by our colleagues who were co-chairs during this period of time when they presented the Q1 quarterly report to City Council several weeks ago. Beginning in April, the Commission moved into its fact-finding phase, which is designed to hear from key stakeholders, assess the current system in Portland, learn from other jurisdictions, and receive and consider proposals from subject matter experts. The Commission and its subcommittees met 14 times, making the PAC still one of the most active parts of the city government. The Commission held work sessions on community engagement and on internal processes, and held several key briefings, including many required by the City Council in our establishing resolutions.
The fact-finding phase will result in the adoption of 3 documents. These documents are not code recommendations, but set shared understandings among members as to what information has been learned and the Commission's viewpoints on it. They will each be an important contribution to the Commission's eventual decisions and recommendations to the City Council. The first document is the Areas of Agreement on Barriers to Police Accountability and Best Practices in Portland. Barriers to police accountability are the problem that the Commission seeks to solve in its overall work, and therefore this document is the problem statement of the Commission's work. However, the Commission also wants to recognize those practices which are working and should be retained or replicated in the new system. So the document includes best practices as well. The Commission began developing this document in the later part of the second quarter based on the briefings, community input, and member suggestions. The second document is the areas of agreement on best practices and practices to avoid from other jurisdictions. By assessing other jurisdictions' practices, the Commission can develop ideas, see how they work together to create a system, and evaluate their effectiveness at achieving the goals of the Commission's new system. The final document is the areas of agreement on proposals to consider or to avoid from the subject matter experts. The Commission is aware that numerous experts from the community-based organizations to national organizations to individuals working in other jurisdictions may have areas they want to suggest, and this document will help give preliminary impressions of the Commission's views on those proposals. All three documents will be references for the Commission's decisions on what to recommend to the City Council for Portland's new system. These recommendations will be developed starting in the next phase of work.
During this period, the Commission heard from Commissioner Hardesty, Director Ross Caldwell, and Deputy Director Dana Walton-McCauley from the Independent Police Review, Chair Candace Avalos and Co-Chair Yumi Delgado from the Citizen Review Committee, Mayor Wheeler, and Commissioner Mapps. The Commission also heard from Chief Lavelle, Deputy Chief Fromm, Commander Jeff Bell, Acting Captain Greg Pashley, and Police Review Board Coordinator Christopher Paye, all from the Portland Police Bureau. On behalf of the Commission, we would like to thank all of our briefers for coming, and in particular those here today, Commissioner Hardesty and Commissioner Mapps, as well as Mayor Wheeler. During this reporting period, the Commission also scheduled briefings with various individuals and groups which took place in the next quarter, July 1st through September 30th, including Commissioners Ryan and Rubio, and we look forward to updating the City Council on all of those briefings in our next quarterly report.
For the record, thanks for saying that. Wait, I was there. It was in July, though.
We didn't forget you.
Yeah. We're doing rear view mirror. Yeah, okay.
And appreciate you being there.
Yeah.
Thank you. This slide is included because we know community members and council members are interested in how the work is organized and when the PAC will get to specific questions. The Commission previously established its phases of work in the agenda and scope document. This quarterly report covers roughly the first half of the fact-finding phase, which I think clears up some of those questions. Following the conclusion of the fact-finding phase, the Commission will move into a powers and duties phase, in which the functions of the new oversight board and supporting city staff will be defined. After that, the PAC will determine the structure and details, including membership and appointment of the oversight board. The fifth phase of work will identify a transition plan, as well as how this entire system will fit into the city's current structure, organization chart, and how it will relate to other city entities focused on police and policing. In the concluding phases, we will convert agreements into draft city code text and take additional rounds of input from stakeholders and the community before approving a proposal to send to you, the City Council. Alongside all of these tasks is the ongoing work of community engagement, which is a key component of our work and crucial to our success. To anyone watching this live, to anyone watching this live or on video who wants to tell us their story about police or police accountability, we have many ways to give input. Please go to www.portland.gov/police-accountability and click on Get Involved to ensure your voice is a part of the development of Portland's new system.
If we could pause here, I believe Commissioner Hardesty has a question or statement.
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Mike Myers, Samir, and the three vice chairs of the Police Accountability Committee. I think this is the page that we're on now that talks about what the next steps are. I guess my question is, it appears that the commission is giving itself more work than they are legislatively authorized to do. And I want to be clear about where did that happen. This commission has a charge, a very specific charge, given to them by voters, and it looks like mission creep is taking place within this committee. Would somebody like to explain to me why we are going down paths that are not that were not part of the original work plan of this committee?
Thank you, Commissioner Hardesty. The description of the work of the commission is based off of the agenda and scope document, which was developed by the commission and approved in March by the commission members, based off of the documents in, I believe it's resolutions 37527 and resolutions 37528. The main additions were hearing from more voices. There's a few items in those two resolutions which say other relevant parties, other experts, and brainstorming which members and experts was a core component of what the commission did, and then listed those out explicitly to invite those folks to come and brief the commission. I think that's the main difference, but if there's something specific, we're happy to answer that.
So maybe I misheard, but what I heard was that this committee is now in the fact-finding phase, and there are about 3 or 4 other phases coming after that. And so, powers and duties make sense, structure and details. We did not ask this committee to develop the transition plan. That is not under the scope of work of this committee. We also didn't ask them to do like national best practices or whatever's working in the state of Oregon, because we don't really care what's working in the state of Oregon, because this is like new, and we're building this from the ground up. And so, again, as someone who's been with this from the beginning, I'm concerned that mission creep is moving in. And when you start expanding what it is we have charged you with doing, then you're going to miss your deadline to actually get us what we need. And so, I love you guys. I know you're doing work that is actually transformational, but I don't want you to miss out on being focused on the mission you were given, and not bringing everything that's ever happened around police accountability into this conversation. That's a failed mission. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, Commissioner Hardesty, I appreciate the call in, and I think you created a commission of 20 people who really care. So scope creep is, to me, not a surprise. And so I welcome that invitation to keep coming. I think as we wanted to really understand the problems and the barriers of the current system, of course, we could all write PhD dissertations about it at this point. So I welcome the challenge, and we will refocus and bring your feedback back to the full commission at our next meeting.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I am committed to your success. So I don't want you to take on issues that we've been trying to fix for 20, 30, 40 years. I want you to actually only do the mission we've given you. And it is a huge mission, and it's a mission that requires you to build trust among so many different constituencies. That's more than enough work. And so don't allow people with 30, 40 years of experience in this to drag you down paths that are actually not going to get us to what we need. This council is depending on you to give us the best policy recommendations possible, and we need you to be focused, laser focused. So thank you. And I am happy to come anytime, anywhere that you guys want me to come and have this conversation, because, I need you to be successful, but you can't do it if you're going to fix every ill that exists within policing in this one committee.
Thank you. And just to clarify, if there's new council guidance on this, we're happy to change and adapt. Under Resolution 37548's Exhibit 1, under mandated duties of the commission, begins on page 2, there is transition plan on there, which is why that ended up in the document that lays it out and was given its own section in terms of phase of work to work on. If there's any new guidance from council, we'll certainly comply with whatever that is.
Thank you, I appreciate that. And no, I'm not suggesting new guidance. I'm just suggesting that we stay laser focused and not allow mission creep to interfere with the enormous work that this commission has to do. And again, I'm happy to review it with you, because I do think that there may be misinterpretations about what the role of this commission is. And so I'm happy to come and review it with the commission itself, just to make sure we stay on track, because we don't have a lot of time to do this, right? We have a very set period of time, and as we know, Judge Steinman will only give us more time if he believes that we're actually doing the work that this commission has been charged with doing.
I do also want to state that in credit to Director Myers and our staffer with Samir Kanal, Samir has been absolutely impressive as far as keeping us on track and trying to keep us laser focused, but this input definitely allows us to be able to create a much more expedient process. So again, as Commissioner Faith said, we would love to bring this to the full commission and find a way to be able to make sure that we're much more expedient. But I am very grateful for what Samir has been able to do for our commission in keeping us focused as is.
Well, let me just say, it makes a difference to have staffing, good staffing, who understands what the mission is. So I agree, Samir's been fabulous. And Mike Myers' leadership, we would not be where we are without Mike Myers' leadership. So we have a good team. I just want to make sure that we are so laser focused, that we are getting the business done, that the people of Portland need you to get done.
And colleagues, if I may, first I want to say I really appreciate this dialogue. I encourage staff to check in with Commissioner Hardesty in the mayor's office to clarify guidance around the scope of this committee. And I'm also mindful of the fact that we have not finished the presentation yet, so I'd like to invite our invited guests to resume their presentation if there's still something left.
Absolutely.
I forget where we were. Ms. Lloyd, were you up?
Okay, yes.
I was actually just about to turn it over to Seema.
Thank you, Commissioner Lloyd. All right, so finally we want to let you know what is happening next. The fact-finding phase of the work began in April and is continuing into September this month. Community engagement events are currently being planned with community partners and will begin being held in late September or early October. And to give more detail on this work, our colleagues who began serving as co-chairs after us will come to City Council to report on the next quarter, from July to September 2022, in late October or early November. So I would like to thank you for giving us the opportunity to brief you on the work of the Police Accountability Commission through June 2022. We look forward to continuing our work to honor the will of the voters in creating a new system of accountability, including a new oversight board for Portland Police. We are happy to answer any questions that the council may have. Thank you.
Colleagues, any questions? I see Commissioner Hardesty has one.
I am curious. Let me first thank you for your second report. And I'm very happy to see that we're caught up. And so now we're moving into the future. My question is, what has been the biggest challenge that you co-chairs have faced in this work thus far? And what do you need from the council to remove those barriers? Caught you a little off guard,
Well,
did
you know, you're asking us a meta question of the barriers, of our barriers. So I think, as I mentioned earlier, there are 20 people whom you've selected that really care about this issue, and not only police accountability, but the culture of policing. And so I do think that that has been a challenge of we are asked to give a very targeted recommendation when the culture is really broken. And so I think being that laser focused has been a continual challenge. And I do think that many of our colleagues are good about kind of calling us back in of, wait, this is the culture of policing versus police accountability. And so I think that's one of the challenges. And also, we meet a lot. I mean, I maybe see my colleagues more than I see my husband. You know, we see each other quite often on Zoom. 3 nights a week for many of us. And so it's been a little bit of a learning curve to work with 20 people closely whom are all volunteers. So I think both of those have been barriers that I've seen. I don't know if my colleagues Seamob or Lavisa want to add anything.
Well, while they're thinking about whether they want to share barriers, I want to tell you thank you. It is a huge commitment when you are a volunteer, learning about an issue that you're unfamiliar with, but making a dedicated commitment to say, or you know way too much about, right? You could be at one end or the other, right? But I'm speaking directly to you, Commissioner. This is, as you said, learning curve was straight up. And I just wanted to say thank you to you. I really am grateful that 20 community members thought that this issue was important enough for them to dedicate the amount of time and energy and thoughtfulness that each of you continue to do. If this was easy, we'd have fixed this a long time ago, right? What you're doing is revolutionary work, and you need to make sure that you're building in self-care in this work and taking care of your other commission members, right? And I hope you don't take my earlier questions as negative criticism, because again, you know me, I want this, I need this to work, right? I need this to work fabulously so that once again, we're a national model. So I will stop. Did you have something you wanted to add?
I think Commissioner Lloyd had something to say, looks like.
Sure, I'd be happy to comment on your question, Commissioner Hardesty. First of all, thank you so much for your ongoing support of this commission. It really means a lot to know that we have your support. And Mayor Wheeler, we've had I think every member of the council, and you've all expressed your support, and it's been enormously helpful to us to know that we have that support. I think that your notes are very well taken. I think that. In terms of barriers to the work and getting the work done, there is such a balance that we have to try to strike, right? Because this is nights and weekends for most of us. This is really almost like a second job is how I would characterize it. 2 meetings a week, 3 meetings a week, sometimes 4 meetings a week. We are, attempting to herd cats a little in that we have 20 people who, you selected these 20 people because they have so much knowledge and so much expertise in a huge variety, a diversity of fields, which brings so much richness, I think, to the work that we do. But it also means that we're trying to get 20 people to agree on things and ideally come to consensus, because we really try to work on a consensus model as much as is possible. I would say I think we're all definitely keenly aware of the time limits that we are working with, and we're thinking about that all the time. So it's sort of a balance between looking at the time limits and trying to work in a way that is humane to ourselves, that is humane to staff. We essentially only had 1 staff person to support 20 people plus all of the attendant parts of this up until pretty recently. So I think that any support that the council can give around staffing and just keeping us staffed up, and I will say thank you. Something I wanted to mention is thank you so much to the council for working really quickly to fill spots when we've had spots open. I think we're now fully said we have 20 people, which is great. But yeah, it's really just that mix of we're doing a kind of an enormous task with a lot of volunteers, nights and weekends, learning a lot of it from scratch, trying to hit this deadline, and then also trying to keep it humane for all of the people involved. So I would say that's a challenge.
I really appreciate that, Commissioner Lloyd. And let me just say, Samir and I will talk, because I think it's pretty brutal for you to be meeting 4 or 5 times a week and then on the weekend. So I think we can find a more balanced approach. I mean, I want you to have the sense of urgency, but I don't want you to kill yourself in the process of getting us the proposal that we need. And let me just say, for me, that's too much. That is way too many meetings. So we have to figure out as a city how to support you so that you can do the best work you can do when you're coming together. But I would not be on a committee that made me meet 3 or 4 times a week, just so you know, right? And so if I wouldn't do it, I don't expect you to do it. So I think we as a city can model good support of our community volunteers who dedicate so much time and energy for these big issues. So Samir and I and Director Mike Myers will talk about how we make sure we're not trying to kill you in this process. Thank you. Back to you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Does that wrap up the formal part of our invited presentation? Megan, do we have any public testimony?
We have one individual on the line.
Okay, let's hear from that person.
Mark Porras.
Mark. Welcome, Mark.
Yep. Good morning, President Maps and commissioners. For the record, my name is Mark Porras. I use he, him pronouns. And I'm testifying today as a member of the group Portland Cop Watch, which, as you know, has a member who sits on the Police Accountability Commission. One of the barriers to police accountability discovered by the commission is when community oversight boards do their work but are ignored by the city. The report states that the commission sent a letter to City Council requesting a change to the quorum rules in June, the very rules that had already led to the commission canceling a work session in May. The commission resent the letter on July 15th with minor changes. So as of today, 68 days have passed since that letter was sent, still with no response from City Council. Portland Cop Watch brought this up on August 31st during testimony on the appointments of new members to both this commission and PSEP, since both of these groups will benefit from having their quorum set at a majority of seated and active members. There was discussion among Mayor Wheeler, Commissioner Hardesty, and Chief Deputy City Attorney Heidi Brown with a potential result that we support, being that a resolution would be brought to council to allow all city commissions to set their quorums to a majority of seated and active members. We hope that this resolution is already in the works because we're just as tired of asking for this as you are of hearing us ask for it. This is especially timely for the Police Accountability Commission, as you've all been discussing, since they are on a tight timeline. We know there will be more resignations at some point, and it will take time to fill the vacancies. The commission's work is too important to be hampered by unnecessary quorum restrictions. And we also very much look forward to seeing the community getting more involved in helping shape the Police Accountability Commission's work. The city doesn't want to find itself in the same sort of position that the state finds itself in right now with the Commission on Statewide Law Enforcement Standards of Conduct and Discipline, the LESC. The LESC, whose mission is to set statewide standards for police discipline, had 15 meetings and came up with their initial report for the House Committee on Judiciary, but received just a single comment from the public at one of their 15 meetings. They then held 4 non-interactive midweek public comment sessions, all at 1 p.m., shutting out participation from Oregonians who work 9 to 5. And they now have over 500 pages of written comments to digest, all because they did an inadequate job of informing and involving the public from the beginning. This commission needs to, the Police Accountability Commission needs to pay close attention to what the LESC is putting down on paper, because at this time, their proposals will allow slap on the wrist discipline for serious misconduct. The ability of Portland's oversight system that this commission is designing is in danger of being handcuffed in its ability to properly discipline officers by poor decision-making at the state level. The Police Accountability Commission discussed this at 2 recent meetings. However, it is the city of Portland, where 82% of voters want more police accountability, that should be providing guidance to the state so that when the Police Accountability Commission's work is done, we will have an oversight system that actually holds the police accountable. Again, we look forward to seeing the public more involved in working with the Police Accountability Commission in order to help them come up with a system of accountability that works for every Portlander. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Megan, any more testimony?
That concludes testimony.
Colleagues, any more discussion? Commissioner Ryan, did you have something, or was that Commissioner Hardesty? Okay, go ahead.
First of all, thanks for being here. It's so hard to build something this complex, and so I realize what you've been going through. And perhaps your question, Commissioner Hardesty, about scope and maybe avoiding the mission creep was actually under the category of self-care, like to make sure that that we don't have to go down too many rabbit holes, if you will. I might have missed this in the report, but when you were doing your fact finding, you mentioned that you reached out to experts. and you had conversations with experts. Is there a list of the experts that you spoke to and some summaries of comments that we could see in full transparency? Okay. If we could have that, that would be great. Or our office, I'd love to see that.
The subcommittee on research, as part of doing its work to develop this document, started with desk research in terms of reports coming out, mostly documentation. That is in the meeting materials, and we can summarize that and send that to council for sure. It's currently broken up by the particular meeting in which it was discussed. Additionally, as part of discussing other jurisdictions, members of the commission were often in contact with someone who is staffing at a similar or structure that said, well, we do it this way, but it would be better if we could do it that way, and here's why, or here's a barrier that we're facing. And so as part of that entry point, other jurisdictions, those folks are subject matter experts. They do this every day. And so as a result, that information was put into the along with the desk research on reports. There are notes on that. That's also published on our website under the subcommittee on resources page on the website that we can also summarize and send in one cohesive place to council.
Thank you. I realized it might have been in an addendum that I didn't see, but just in full transparency, I wanted to know that existed. Thank you so much. Thanks again for your time. It's a little overwhelming. Yeah.
Great. Colleagues, other further questions or other comments?
No, I'm happy to make a motion that we accept this report as presented.
That would be welcome. I have a motion from Commissioner Hardesty. Do we have a second?
Sure, second.
Commissioner Hardesty moves the report. Commissioner Ryan seconds. Megan, please call the roll.
Hardesty?
Let me again thank the co-chairs for showing up today, both virtually and in person. Thank you for your dedication and commitment to the mission of making sure that we have the most accountable police in the country when the work that you are involved in is done. I am extremely grateful for your time, your commitment, but I have identified a new role for me, which is to remind you all that self-care is key in getting through this process. And I will be, like your mother, reminding you of that as we move forward. I'm very happy to vote aye on this report and look forward to continued success in this effort. Thank you.
Rubio?
I want to thank you all again and echo all the comments that my colleagues have made about the tremendous work that you're doing. I also really appreciate that you're here in person today and virtually to share with us directly. That really makes a big difference to hear directly from you. And I also want to appreciate Samir too for all of his hard work, for keeping all of our offices informed and moving the ball forward on behalf of this commission. And you are doing this, largely on your own or with the skeleton crew. So I just want to appreciate the depth of work and the quality of work that you're doing. And just thank you on behalf of all of us, as well as Director Myers for his support as well. It's clear that you're all going really deep on this. And speaking for myself, that I obviously do not want you to sacrifice your family time and your personal health and your well-being, of course, that always comes first. But you're going deep really gives me confidence that you're doing the thoughtful, careful work of looking at all of the details to make sure that we're coming up with something very high quality for Portland and right for Portland. And so I deeply appreciate that you're doing that. It gives me a lot of confidence and trust in your analysis. So thank you for that. We're all really looking forward to what your outcome is, and I'm right there too, and I'm here to support in any way that I can. So I vote aye.
Ryan?
Caught me off guard. I just want to, again, echo, I like the word thoughtful. You guys are all being so thoughtful. I know my one experience with you was the dialogue was different than it's been with other commissions I've met with. It's true. You could tell that you were passionate, of course, but you could also tell you had a lot of curiosity. And so it didn't feel as baked as sometimes I experience. And I think that is important to keep that openness. Since 82% voted yes on this, within that 82%, you could get a lot of variations on what that means, that accountability. And so I really appreciate the openness. And that's why it's important for me to just see who the experts are and that we continue to be open. I think sometimes when I've been involved in complex issues, which is why it's easy to do mission creep, it's like the more you know, the more you don't know. And so it's easy to experience that. So Mayor, thanks. It's really clear that you have a lot of respect and trust that's being built here. And I think the good news about you all catching up on these reports is that we've had a chance to dive in a little bit more of late. And so it was a little confusing to me, like this is back already, but I forgot that we were catching up. So it feels like the inertia, the physics equation is really taking off and that we're seeing a lot of momentum. So I appreciate all of you very much. And I'm excited to say support this report. Thanks.
Maps?
Yeah, aye.
I'll echo many of the themes my colleagues shared. I'd like to thank staff and the commissioners for their work on this project and their presentation today. I vote aye. The report is accepted. And thank you very much. And colleagues, now we will move to the regular agenda. Megan, can you?
Mr. President.
Yeah.
Would you mind if we took a 5-minute break?
Absolutely. Let's do that. We will reconvene. How about a 10-minute break? And we will reconvene at 11:15.
Recording stopped.
We're back in session, folks, and we are about to take up the regular agenda. Megan, can you please read item 785?
Authorize sewer revenue bonds to finance sewer system capital improvements for amount not to exceed $440 million and to refund outstanding bonds.
Colleagues, this ordinance authorizes the issuance of sewer system revenue bonds. The Bureau of Environmental Services manages the city sewer system and periodically issues bonds for capital projects. Financing large sewer projects with bonds provides more financial stability for the sewer utility and more predictable sewer rates for the city's ratepayers. The city's debt manager, Matt Gierach, and members of BES staff are here to present the ordinance. Welcome.
Thank you for the
We got Matt.
Commissioner Maps.
There we go.
Can you hear me okay?
Maybe we can turn him up a little bit.
Get my computer closer to me. Good morning, Commissioners. For the record, I'm Matt Gierach, Debt Manager with the Bureau of Revenue and Financial Services. This ordinance authorizes the city to issue up to $440 million of sewer system revenue bonds to finance various projects under the Bureau of Environmental Services Capital Improvement Plan and to pay issuance costs. The borrowing authorization is expected to cover approximately the next 2 years of the Bureau's financed capital expenditures, including a significant portion of the regulatory mandated secondary treatment expansion program recently approved by City Council in August. This ordinance allows the proposed borrowing to initially take place as interim financing. Our current expectation is to issue a bank credit facility to provide interim funding until the spring, which at that point, we will issue the long-term bonds of this authorization. This timing is primarily driven by the upcoming refinancing of the Series 2013A sewer system revenue bonds, which we expect to refund for debt service savings at their earliest optional redemption date next year. The 2013A bonds have an interest rate of 5% for the next 15 years when they fully mature, while the current market rate for refinancing with the same maturity year is approximately 3.4%. However, as you know, interest rates move each day, and there's risk that refinancing would not produce debt service savings, and in that case, we would not refund these bonds. For the $440 million new money portion of the borrowing, the estimated borrowing rate is 4.08%, assuming a 25-year repayment term and current indicative market rates. Over the coming months, the debt management team will work closely with BES to negotiate with our banking partners to attain a temporary credit facility and prepare for and execute a public market bond sale next calendar year. I'm happy to answer any questions on the proposed financing, and I'm also joined by team members from BES for any Bureau-specific questions. Thank you.
Colleagues, do you have any questions at this moment? Megan, do we have any public testimony?
We have one individual.
Okay, great. Let's hear the testimony.
Jessica Zanow.
Welcome, Jessica.
Jessica, are you able to unmute?
Apologies. Yeah, just dealing with the unmute buttons, all the unmute buttons. Thank you for having me. Good morning, commissioners. My name is Jessica Zano. I'm testifying on my own behalf as a Portland Water Bureau and Bureau of Environmental Services customer. Thank you for the opportunity to comment today, and thanks to Goldan Salazar and Matt Gierach for getting back to me with some research and time to prepare for today's meeting. I've also submitted this testimony in writing. While this ordinance refers to a new city bond issuance, I see this as a broader opportunity to comment on some significant concerns I have with the city's water rates. My concerns today fall into three buckets: transparency, accountability, and rate burden. With regard to transparency, the BES put forward another very large rate increase in May of 2022. The increase was improved without sufficient transparent public communication that allowed time for ratepayers to intervene, provide comment, or ask questions. I'm a regulatory professional myself, and even I have extreme difficulty finding information about water rates, forecast future rate increases, what the process is for public engagement. The city employees have been very friendly and helpful, directing me to the information which I never could have found on my own. Customer water bills should clearly provide information on historical stormwater and sewer rates for the last 5 years, percentage year-on-year increases, forecast rate increases for the upcoming fiscal year and the 5-year projection period, and the timeline for when new rates are set, how they're set, what the public process is, and how to intervene and testify. The Portland Utility Board information should also be clearly provided on all customer bills. Portlanders have the right to transparency around their rates, and any other utility, power, gas, et cetera, has a significant public process and transparency around rate setting. With regard to accountability, as with any other public service, the Portland Water Bureau and BES should be accountable to the public for its ability to deliver service at rates that are just and reasonable. Furthermore, their spending should be given considerable public scrutiny, and they should be accountable for justifying any rate increase, let alone the significant yearly increases we see each year in the city. We just heard about a new contract for $15 million over 5 years in item 771. And I want to just say that I appreciate Commissioner Hardesty and MAP's discussion and questioning around the use of contractors in this case and kind of potential cost saving areas. Portlanders have the right to accountability from city offices and providers of public goods and services. This shouldn't be a rubber stamp operation where rate increases are just assumed to pass through every year. Rate burden, I'll quickly get to this. Is, for me as a single person, my rates are double that of what my gas and power bills are combined. And I shower twice a week. I wash 1 load of laundry and one dishwasher run. Over the last 5 years, rates are up 44.32%. My ask today is that some of this information be put into this docket and on public record, and the commissioners consider it before a second reading. And that my ask for the information to be put on record is all in my written testimony. So I will I'll close there. Thank you for considering my testimony today.
Great. And Jessica, I want to take a moment and thank you for testifying today. And I know you've submitted written testimony and reached out to the Water Bureau in my office several times in recent weeks. I really appreciate your dialogue. You're asking smart questions and really pointing us in the right direction. I'll ask my staff to continue to engage with you to help you develop a better understanding of how utility rates are set here in the city of Portland. This is part of our normal city budgeting process, which I recognize can often be complex and opaque, but we would very much like to have you at the table as we develop our rates for next year. And with that, I should probably ask Megan to see if there's any more testimony.
That completes testimony.
Okay, and I should also turn to my colleagues and see if any of my colleagues have any questions or concerns they would like to raise at this moment. Seeing none, I believe this is the first reading of a non-emergency ordinance. It moves to a second reading. Thank you. Next, let's continue with our next regular agenda item, 786. Megan, can you please read that item?
Authorize application to the U.S. Department of Justice, Office of Justice Programs, Bureau of Justice Assistance for a grant in the amount of $502,459 for the Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Assistance Grant Program, FY 2022 local solicitation to assist the Portland metropolitan area law enforcement to prevent and reduce crime and violence.
Thanks, Megan. I still think we might be having some troubles with your mic, at least inside chambers, but we can move forward. Colleagues, this ordinance will authorize the Portland Police Bureau to apply for the 2022 Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Assistance Grant in the amount of about $500,000. Here to speak about the application are Nathan Liamy from the Community Safety Division and Lauren Rosenstein from the Portland Police Bureau. Nathan, Lauren, welcome.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for the time.
Sure.
For the record, my name is Nathan Leamy. I'm with the Community Safety Division. I'm going to share my screen and we'll walk you through a little bit about the grant itself. And Lauren will walk you a little bit about this year's application and the proposal that we have. This grant, usually known as the JAG grant, the Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Assistance Grant. It's a federal grant that the city of Portland has applied for and received every year for the last 17 years, since 2005. It's a non-competitive grant, meaning we apply and typically receive it due to a sort of federal allocation that comes out based on populations. It's a grant that we apply for as the lead sponsor, along with other municipal governments with the city of Gresham and Multnomah County. Funding can go towards any number of things related to personnel, purchasing equipment, supplies, contractual support. The sort of limitations that the Bureau has is it can't replace budgeted expenses that the Bureau already has. One thing to know is that there's a low risk to this grant. It doesn't have a match to it, so there are no obligated funds that the Bureau is required to be putting forward. In terms of the split for this year that we'll have with our partners, the city of Portland receives about half of that full $502,000. The other funds are going to be split across Multnomah County and Gresham. To tell you a little bit about the application and the programs that we are hoping to fund, my colleague Lauren will speak on those.
Good morning. Thank you all so much for having me here today. Like Nathan said, my name is Lauren Rosenstein. My position title is the Equity Training Specialist within the Portland Police Bureau. It's directly in the Equity and Inclusion Office. The position that we're looking for to fund with this grant is a approximately 22-month limited term duration employee who will be a coordinator 2. Their working title right now is the Inclusion and Social Justice Initiative Trainer. This is loosely modeled after the City of Seattle's position of a similar name. This position will be a subject matter expert in social justice initiatives related to law enforcement, inclusive practices, cultural humility, instructional design, and training delivery. While we would love for them to have some knowledge of law enforcement, it is not the primary point of this position. The social justice initiative is the primary point of this position. This position will support the collaborative efforts of the training division and the Equity and Inclusion Office to develop and deliver effective, learner-focused instructional materials that promote organizational change and promote equitable outcomes throughout the city of Portland. Next slide, Nathan. This position will be working very closely with the equity training specialist, myself, the equity and inclusion analyst who was recently hired within the city, the training division as a whole, the Police Equity Advisory Council, which is the advisory council which the Equity and Inclusion Office reports directly to, Portland Police Bureau subject matter experts, as well as community partners, so that we can have input on training and evaluate training and compliance. This position will be designing courses, curricula, and training materials, as well as leading some of the delivery for all Bureau members. They'll be evaluating all Portland Police Bureau trainings from internal and external sources. The goal is to have the Equity Lens tool used at every step of the way, and that this position will be ensuring that practice. Next one, Nathan. To date in 2022, the Portland Police... Oh, yeah, go for it.
Excuse me, Lauren, I apologize. I didn't have my mic on. I believe we have a question from Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Mr. President, Council President. Yes, Lauren, thank you for the presentation. If you could go back a slide. I guess my biggest question is, we are about to hire, I hope, a civilian training dean to assess the constitutionality of our current training and to make recommendations for new training. It feels a bit premature to be hiring someone to develop training materials without the civilian training dean in place. And I know we get this money every year like clockwork. I'm just curious as to why we didn't pick something else to fund with these grants rather than creating a brand new program without a civilian training dean leading that effort?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Commissioner. Currently, as the equity training specialist myself, this is a lot of the work that I'm already doing, which was instituted before the dean was brought to the attention of hiring. The dean themselves, as I understand the position, will be a position that's about, it's a 30,000 foot view. This position is directly related to the, meaningful analysis in its operational mobility at this particular moment in time.
So excuse me for interrupting, Lauren, but it's even more reason to actually have the civilian training dean be involved in hiring someone whose sole job is developing training curriculum. That's why the DOJ is mandating that we hire a civilian training dean, because our current training material, some of it would not pass constitutional muster. And so, so for me, it's not about the value of the position. It's about why fund this with this grant when you have other things you could fund that would actually give us the opportunity to have the civilian training director do their job, and then decide what other supports we need. So I'm just concerned that you picked the wrong, again, not that this is bad, but you just picked the wrong thing to actually fund with this federal grant.
I hear you. I think from my perspective, this is something that has an immediate need and support. And while I understand that this dean position is going to be hired for, I don't know when that's going to happen. And I know that we need this work done immediately. I hear you and I hear the recommendation. And so that's something that Nathan can probably speak more to.
I guess I'm just concerned that we hire somebody that develops training that is unconstitutional, and we pretend that it's equity training, and then we hire the training dean, whose job will be immediately to review every training curriculum we have. So we're going to actually have double work if you, in fact, hire someone to develop training outside of the process of a civilian training dean actually making sure that what's being developed is constitutional, is racially just, and is really what the training bureau needs. It's like you guys think you know what you need, but you don't. That's why we're hiring a civilian training dean to actually lead that effort.
Yeah, it might be helpful too if I provide a little bit of context of what else is happening to support that exact effort that you're speaking of. Right now with Natalie Porta from Parks and Rec is leading a program project right now so that we can develop a training guide that specifically states how to stay in compliance with Title II, Title 6, Title 23 of the city, so that we as training professionals, training analysts, equity trainers throughout the city of Portland are in line with those constitutional requirements. And the goal then would be to have this particular guide so that we can all follow it, and this position would be able to institute it immediately.
So, Lauren, based on what you've just told me, so now we have the Parks Bureau working with the Police Bureau to develop a equity training. The standards around all the protected classes at the city of Portland. I would say again, I think we're putting the cart before the horse. I think it is ludicrous to be developing practices that we anticipate will be instituted throughout the city of Portland before we have actually evaluated how we do this kind of training today. And what we know based on what we've seen in training curriculum is we have not looked at it through a constitutional and racial justice lens. And so it just doesn't make sense to me that we would continue to be going down that path without pausing to actually fundamentally change how we train people who are sworn to protect and serve.
Commissioner Hardesty, if I can jump in here. First, I very much appreciate the point that you are making here. And I'll have to, I'm still processing your underlying argument. I would contend that I think the questions that you are raising are policy level questions, which are frankly probably above Lauren's pay grade today. I encourage my colleagues on council to engage in some of the issues that Commissioner Hardesty has raised, and I hope that I was going to invite Commissioner or Lauren to resume her presentation.
Well, let me just say that it's not new that I had questions about this proposal. I did reach out and say I would ask questions. So if the police bureau didn't bring the appropriate people to actually answer my questions, that also says something.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Hardesty. Lauren, I'd like to invite you to resume your presentation.
Sure, thank you. So to date in 2022, the Portland Police Bureau has received upwards of 200 lesson plans and PowerPoints to be evaluated utilizing the Equity Lens tool. This particular position will ensure that all lesson plans, PowerPoints, and delivery associated with these trainings are consistent with best practices. The 200 lesson plans and PowerPoints come out to roughly 600 hours of instructional content. So again, this position is ensuring that those best practices around diversity, equity, inclusion, social justice, and anti-racism are kept at the forefront. Next slide, Nathan. At this point in the year, I myself, as the equity training specialist, have delivered approximately 100 hours of instructional content. This position specifically will make sure that they are assisting trainers in ensuring compliance with the City of Portland's Title 23 Civil Rights, Title 6 of the Civil Rights Act, and Title 2 of the Civil Rights Act. This has, all with full recognition that we have gaps in training, both to our sworn and non-sworn professional staff. This position would be identifying those gaps and working to fulfill them. We also have those same gaps within specialty units and scenario training. So this position would be ensuring that is falling within compliance. Next slide, Nathan. That's the presentation. So I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Great. Well, I would like to poll my colleague to see if they have any questions, but first I should check in with Megan to see if we have any public testimony on this.
No one signed up.
Great. Colleagues, do you have any questions? Okay, yeah, please. Commissioner Ryan.
Yes, thank you, Lauren, for the presentation. I wanted to go back a little bit to the structure. So this position will eventually report to the dean, correct? That will be hired?
It's not entirely sure. It's a limited term position, right? So this is a little bit of a test to see about proof of concept. So as Nathan has described in the past, it's a way to have this kind of low barrier to see if this is a position that can be utilized. As of right now, the training division does not have the capacity to hold this position because the dean has not been hired, and with no timeline of when that will happen. It's going to be held in the Equity and Inclusion Office. The goal would be that in a year, we can demonstrate that this is a position that is incredibly valuable and necessary, and it would move into the training division to be nested under the dean.
I think you started to answer my second question, and that is that this will have a dotted line at least to the city's Office of Diversity and Equity and Inclusion, Equity Office. Like all the other bureaus, their person.
Do you mean, will it be part of the Equity and Inclusion Office, not the Portland Police Bureau's office?
Well, the city has its own equity office, and so my question is, I assume, this is once again one of those assumption moments, and sorry, Commissioner Rubio, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, I'm just trying to understand how we do our organization chart at the city. So I assume, since we have that office, that each bureau's people that do this kind of work have at least a dotted line to the centralized system.
I see. Yes, thank you. We all work very closely with our partners over at the Office of Equity and Human Rights, though this specific position would be embedded within the Portland Police Bureau. So yes, a dotted line, not a solid line partnership.
Okay, thank you.
And to provide some more information on your first question, Commissioner Ryan, in terms of timing wise, this application is for 2 years worth of funding. The 2-year grant could either begin now or it could be extended for up to 4 years. So we wouldn't obviously hire somebody tomorrow. There would be some sort of time gap. We could push that back and have some flexibility in terms of when we would actually get somebody in the door and begin spending against the grant. The grant is also generally meant for pilot projects, for there to be a low risk way for bureaus to test something out, see whether it is a good idea, and then move forward with it. So Commissioner Hardesty, with some of your concerns there, if that timing could shift things and shift some of your concerns, as well as whether or not the Bureau would give this a request in the future for long-term permanent funding, that question certainly wouldn't be answered until long after the training dean had been hired.
Great. Commissioner Rubio, did you have a question?
No, it was similar to Commissioner Ryan, so I do have a question.
Commissioner
Mr. President.
Hardesty, please.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you for that, Nathan. If I recall correctly, the last year we hired someone to develop training video films because what we realized is that we could not, in fact, bring people in person to do training. So, and we funded that for, I believe, 18 months. And so where is that position now that we did with the last grant that we got through this process?
At this point, that position is still being funded on the grant and will be, I believe, until the end of this fiscal year. And the Bureau is considering whether or not they would put that forward as a long-term request to be getting permanent funding for it, or whether they would let it expire.
So, it does beg the question, kind of, do we ever go back when we start out these little pilots and actually say, are we going to keep this one, do away with this one? And unfortunately, the way we're asked as a council, we're asked as a one-off rather than the entire package of what it is we're trying to accomplish. So I think I have enough of my question answered now, but it's a great example. So if you are going to keep doing the video training, because my assumption is we'll continue to do things virtually and in person, or in a combination of the two, where's that funding going to come from? And why not actually ask for funding again to continue to provide video training for police, rather than starting a position that the new training dean may or may not think is what is the most critical need right now when it comes to training incoming and cultural shifting Portland police officers.
Good. Thank you for those comments, Commissioner Hardesty. Commissioner Rubio.
I just want to go back to the question that Commissioner Ryan raised about the dotted line. And I know that you said that you are working alongside or in partnership with the Office of Equity. So I would just want to offer, I would love to sit down with you offline and talk about how that work knits together and what that looks like and how we can be a stronger part of that. That'd be great.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Colleagues, any other questions? Yeah, Commissioner Ryan.
Comment. Yep, thank you, Lauren. You're really handling a lot of questions right now, and I appreciate that. I think in your presentation, when you said delivery and outcomes, it's as the people representing the people in the city, we just want to know that there's follow through on that part of the presentation that said delivery and outcomes. So we don't want to keep opening up new grants until we have some clarity about, are we getting traction on the outcomes from the last one, and how will we know we have success with this grant as well? Does that make sense? And so I think some of our confusion is we can't hear concretely if in fact we are building that infrastructure and for those outcomes.
Yes, I really appreciate that. I think for the purposes of this position, it's going to have to work very closely in tandem with the newly hired analyst who is a solid line to the Office of Equity and Human Rights. And they're nested here within our Portland Police Bureau. And the goal there is for this newer position, myself as the equity training specialist and the analyst, to all work together so that we can really understand from a results-based accountability standpoint, while we're building out our new racial equity plan, what the equitable outcome is that we're working toward, and then move backward from there to understand what it is that we need to do to take action today in the classroom through scenario training, both for our sworn and our non-sworn employees, right? So this is it seems like it's a small maybe position that's going to be doing this one thing, but the goal is for it to be more of a spider web in the way that it's moving from area to area and connecting all of these dots together. As of right now, just a little to speak a tiny bit maybe to Commissioner Hardesty, some of your concerns with this. This is all work that I'm currently doing. I was hired about a year and a half ago, and through this year and a half, I have realized that there is more to this position than can be done by one person. And so, you know, speaking a little bit to the self-care that you spoke to before, this is an overwhelming space, and I very much so need help more in the immediate.
Thanks, Lauren. Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Mr. President. Lauren, let me just say how grateful I am and appreciative I am of your transparency, right? I really, really appreciate that. And I want you to know, if you need help, and I heard Commissioner Rubio make the same offer, she and I are here to help troubleshoot how we can help support your position. It is a vital position. And the city continues to hire one person that's actually going to change equity in a bureau, which is, you know, the definition of insanity. And so I do want you to know I see you, I hear you, and I want to help you be successful. And so my criticism has nothing to do with your thought process. It's just, how does it fit into the big picture of where we say we're moving, right? And that did not get answered for me today. But I'm here to help you figure out, yeah, there should never be any one-person shops at the city of Portland, but there are way too many of them. So I see you. Thank you.
Great. Colleagues, any more questions? Seeing none, this is the first reading of a non-emergency ordinance. It moves to second reading. Next, we have item 787. This is a second reading. Megan, can you please read the title?
Amend Erosion and Sediment Control Regulations Code to clarify consistency and ease of administration, and adopt the enforcement fee schedule to add escalating fees for noncompliance.
Colleagues, any further discussion? Seeing none, Megan, please call the roll.
Hardesty.
Aye.
Rubio.
Aye.
Ryan.
Aye.
Maps.
Aye. The item passes. Next, we have a 4/5 agenda item. Megan, please read the title for 788.
Authorize a letter of agreement between the City, Portland Fire and Rescue, and the Portland Firefighters Association, International Association of Firefighters Local 43, to amend the collective bargaining agreement to outline incentives and other details of lateral firefighter training.
Commissioner Hardesty, I believe you are the sponsor of this item.
That is correct, and I also want to thank the mayor for co-sponsoring this measure with me. Let me say, for the incredible men and women who make up Portland Fire and Rescue, the last 3 years have been like nothing they have ever seen or any of us have ever seen before. The good news is that we have fabulous leadership today at Portland Fire and Rescue who are committed to the care and support of the people who every day deal with disasters in our community. I was shocked to learn that, unlike Portland Police, Portland Fire and Rescue could not do lateral transfers as per their contract at that time. and worked with Chief Boone and Human Resources to figure out how we could make that opportunity available. In fact, I was kind of shocked to learn a firefighter could move here, say, from Salem, and have to start over and do the entire training all over again, which is absolutely unacceptable. So because of the leadership in the Fire Bureau today, we were able to first actually test out a pilot project to see how we could incorporate lateral transfers into Portland Fire and Rescue. And now the ordinance before you today is going to make this a permanent part of how we actually expand opportunity for people who want to be firefighters in the city of Portland. I think I'm going to steal Chief Boone's thunder for just a moment, because she told me last night that we just got notified that we have a federal grant that's been approved for over $2 million to help us reopen Station 23 and hire 6 firefighters. Now, as you know, those things don't happen overnight. It has been in the works since 2019. We were denied in 2019, but I am happy to say being denied once does not stop Portland Fire and Rescue from continuing to look for additional resources. So we were just told last night that our congressional delegation announced that we would be receiving those funds. So more excitement to come. But right now, I'd like to turn it over to who's not Deputy Director Ryan Gillespie, who, that's what it says on my screen. I'm going to turn it over to Chief Sarah Boone and have her take this away. Good morning, Chief. Welcome.
Good morning, Commissioner Hardesty. Thank you for the thoughtful introduction. And good morning, President Mapps and members of council. My name is Sarah Boone, Fire Chief for the City of Portland. And with me today, I have Division Chief of Training, Anjanette Jackson, as well as our Business Operations Manager, Kezia Warner, for any questions. First off, I also want to put on the public record, as a fire agency and a bureau, I do not make these decisions alone. The fire service is always about teamwork, from boots on the ground, firefighters to officers to battalion chiefs, deputy chiefs, all the way up to the chief's office, as well as our partners when it comes to Local 43. The things that we have experienced and went through, one person does not have all the answers. And I rely heavily on the ideas and the solutions, all up and down the chain of command, as well as with Local 43. We would not be here if it wasn't for our partnership. So tremendous acknowledgement and thank you to the entire organization, as well as PFFA. Today, we are here before you to request support for phase 3 of our lateral hire program. It is for our field training officers to ensure that Portland Fire and Rescue can move forward with an accelerated training to address our staffing shortages. This is the first time in Portland Fire's history that we have conducted a lateral hire training program. And this is to expedite to get new recruits, lateral recruits out in the field faster and to reduce overtime. This is the first time we have done this. And so we assembled a small group, and I'd like to acknowledge Chief Jackson and under her leadership of our medical services and training division. It was her entire section from our training academy, our in-service station 2, our training lieutenants, our emergency medical services section, as well as our recruitment office and our emergency deputy chiefs from emergency operations. And as I said, a representative from Local 43. In order to implement this training, we are asking for your approval to compensate our field training officers with premium pay for voluntarily taking on an additional workload in our emergency operations division. This will enable us to reduce the overall time frame of lateral recruits spend in our training division from 1 year down to 6.5 months. Wow. And then again, the ultimate goal is to reduce overtime by getting as many firefighter recruits trained and in service as fast as possible without compromising safety. Thank you.
Is that the Commissioner Hardesty? Is that the end of your presentation?
Yes, Council President, that is the end of the formal presentation. We're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Great. Well, first, let me see if there's anyone, any member of the public who would like to testify on this item.
No one signed up.
No one has signed up. Colleagues, any questions about this particular item? I have a couple of just quick questions. Chief Boone and Commissioner Hardesty, both congratulations. This looks like a great program. As I understand the item before us today, we're basically talking about how we pay for training, new training or additional training, or how do we incentivize trainers to train our lateral hires? Is that
Actually,
correct?
no. Actually, what this in front of us is making sure that we continue to support the training that will happen in the field after they've completed their 6 months academy training. And so this will be the field training officer that will work with this new firefighter for some time, and it's the 6% trainer fee that will become, it will be mobile, right? So prior to this, all the training happened in the academy,
Yep.
right? And now, because we're doing lateral transfers, some of that training will be on-the-job training in the field. So we need a trainer to actually monitor how they are working with the public and with their colleagues to make sure that, in fact, the high standards that Portland Fire and Rescue has set are maintained. We currently have 14 lateral hires that will be graduating next month, early next month, October 3rd, 4th, 5th?
13 to 14.
13 to 14. See, close. That will be graduating. And so we want to make sure that the training officers will be able to continue to work with them and that we don't penalize trainers who are going to be training on the job with these new lateral hires.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Hardesty. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. I bet you didn't know I had all that kind of detailed knowledge.
No, that's very impressive, and I very much sympathize. I have similar issues in some of my bureaus. Maybe, I don't know if this question is for Commissioner Hardesty or Chief Boone. How are we going to pay for this?
What do you mean, how we're going to pay for it? So that is a Commissioner Hardesty question.
Yes, Commissioner Hardesty. So we are providing, would it be correct to say that we're providing we're increasing the rate? We're increasing the rate at which we pay trainers?
Well, let me just say the short version is we're going to pay for it because we're going to have to utilize less overtime and we're going to have to utilize less force overtime. And so we're going to pay for it because with the savings that we are currently spending on overtime.
Well, I see how those savings, and I don't actually question the premise of how this program ultimately works. You'll save by bringing on more firefighters. You'll have less overtime in the future. But what pot of money does the trainer get paid out of tomorrow?
The fire bill's budget. The budget that was approved by us in June is where the current money comes from.
Excellent. So this is revenue neutral. Thank you.
This action today is revenue neutral, but I do want to put my colleagues on notice. The City Gate report showed clearly that we've cut pretty much every administrative background in the Portland Fire and Rescue, and we still need more firefighters. But we don't just need firefighters, we need the back room folks who are actually doing the certification and training and support for the great men and women who are out there doing this work every day. So we will be having a very lively conversation during this year's budget process. So as we talk about our community safety system, we're truly looking at where we have lacked investments, and these investments in fire have been lacking for decades. So, it wasn't me or it wasn't Chief Boone. And so we'll be having lively conversations as we start preparing for next year's budget, but there are no budget implications for what we're proposing today at this time.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Hardesty. One more question. I believe the Chief addressed this in her presentation, but I want to make sure I heard it correctly. By virtue of passing this ordinance today, one of the things we'll be doing is reducing the amount of time it takes to train these 17, I think, 14 lateral hires from 12 months to 6 months. Is that how it goes?
Yeah, thank you, President Mabs. I'm going to turn it over to Division Chief Anjanette Jackson, who has been heavily vested with the group that really has taken a comprehensive look at our training and how we have done it in the past. And normally it's been 1 year. And again, this was a group effort where we looked at every single perspective of not only our entry-level training academy, our in-service when it comes to Station 2, and then what is the responsibility if we were to shorten it from 1 year down to 6 months, which is getting people from the training division over into EOPS, and then having emergency ops firefighters, officers being field training officers to continue some of the hands-on skills training as well as certification. So we're just spreading the amount of time instead of having it all in the training section, as we're getting them out into the emergency operations, and then unfortunately having to displace teams, but we will redeploy them to fill vacancies to reduce our overtime. But I would like to give the floor to Chief Jackson so she can at least give you kind of an in-depth perspective of what they were looking at to answer your question, President.
Great. Welcome, Chief Jackson.
Good morning, and thank you, Chief Boone. I'm sorry my title doesn't match, but my name is AJ Jackson. I'm the Division Chief of our Medical Services and Training Division. And just to highlight a little bit, this program and our ability to hire lateral firefighters gives us the opportunity to leverage their previous experience and training and to not put them through that entry-level firefighter type training. So this was a brand new program. This group that we hired in May of 2022 is our very first take on it. And we realize that as we go through this program, we're going to be constantly asking for feedback, not only from the recruits themselves as they go through each phase, but also the trainers that are involved and getting an assessment of their feelings. So as it stands right now, we've gone from a 12-month to approximately 5.5-month program, which means these folks are going out and filling a seat 6.5 months sooner than our previous training model. And with that, we don't want to sacrifice safety. And we know that there's differences between agencies, whether it's technical. We know our city's core values and how important it is to share that side of our city with these new recruits that we bring on as well. And that is folded in, but it's really acknowledging what they're bringing to the table and making sure from our side, the technical piece, the city core value piece, the soft skills are emphasized as well, but we're able to put them and fill those seats, but not leave that, have them under a watchful eye and know that that on-the-job training will occur after they leave Station 2 and are assigned out in the emergency operations, stations outside of the training world. So this phase 3 as it stands now is set to be 3 months. And then at the end of this first class, we will ask for an assessment. We'll see where we need to make adjustments, but we're looking at a 3-month phase 3 FTO field training program out in emergency operations. So I'm happy to try to answer any more questions you might have.
Thanks, Chief Jackson. Actually, that was really helpful. And I do have one more question. Frankly, I'm kind of catching up with this pilot project, and there's a lot of background that I think I haven't been exposed to before. So to simplify things, I get the impression that historically the Fire Bureau hasn't had a program for lateral hires. Now we're trying to implement one. Correct. So what was the hang up before? Was it a city policy that prevented us from doing lateral hires? Was it a state rule? Where did that come from? Or did we just not have the track?
Yeah, we didn't have a job position that recognized the title or the experience or what that would mean. So that was built from the ground up, but we had to do that in partnership with Local 43. And those adjustments to training timelines and some of the back end benefit, there was a lot of work, and they were at the table with a small group that helped kind of
lay the roadmap for how we would go forward. But those job classification, that experience, what we were going to term a quote lateral firefighter, there's requirements and certifications that came with that then allowed us to shorten our training because they came. And as I mentioned, we're leveraging that experience, their previous certifications that they are now bringing to Portland Fire and Rescue. So we had to work that, and Chief Boone may have something to add, but it was in combination with human resources as well as Local 43.
Interesting. Okay. Commissioner Hardesty, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I just wanted to add a little bit, add something I know Chief Jackson wouldn't say, which is that they did not have a champion that was actually making sure that as we're building community safety, we were building a team and we weren't just focused on one part of our community safety system. Commander Jackson's too polite to say, Chief Jackson's too polite to say that, so I will say that on the public record, that is part of the problem, because I was just shocked. I mean, it's like, how could we have it for one part of our community safety system and not for others? And we lost some really brilliant firefighter candidates who moved here from other states because even with 10, 12 years of experience, we were telling them they had to start over again and, from the very beginning. How insane is that, right? We don't do that for any other part of our public safety system. So once we knew that we could actually do something different, we pushed until we could make it happen.
Thank you, Commissioner Hardesty. Colleagues, do we have any other questions or concerns here? I believe this is the equivalent of an emergency ordinance. So, Megan, can we call the roll?
Hardesty?
I just want to say thank you, Chief Sarah Boone, Deputy Chief Jackson, and the incredible leadership team that Chief Boone has put together at Portland Fire and Rescue. This team looks a lot different than any leadership team in the history of Portland Fire and Rescue, and the work that we are doing is going to matter for generations to come. I just want to applaud the great work. Congratulations again on the federal dollars coming in. But as a council, I just want to warn you, that's only a 3-year funding. And so if we are bold enough to open Station 23, I hope we will be bold enough to fund it ongoing. I vote aye.
Rubio?
I just want to thank Chief Boone and Deputy Chief Jackson for being here today, and Commissioner for lifting this up. I'm really glad that these changes are going to be made. I'm happy to vote aye.
Ryan?
Wonderful presentation. Thank you, Chief Boone. Thank you, Lieutenant Jackson. I vote aye.
Maps?
I vote aye. The item passes. Colleagues, now let's go to items that have been pulled off the consent agenda. Megan, can you read, I think, 776?
Create 2 new non-represented classifications of Operations Director and Incident Command Manager and establish compensation ranges for these classifications.
Colleagues, the Mayor's office has requested that this item be continued to next week. So we will move on to our next item pulled off of consent, which I believe is 778. Megan, can you please read that item?
Pay workers' compensation claim of Jerry Heidi in the sum of $55,000 involving Portland Fire and Rescue.
Colleagues, this item was incorrectly filed on the consent agenda. Because the proposed settlement is over $50,000, this item should have been placed on the regular agenda. This ordinance resolves a workers' compensation claim. To tell us more about the settlement, we have Deputy City Attorney Lynn Vu and Senior Workers' Compensation Disability Analyst Vicki Bisbee. Lynn, Vicki, welcome.
Hi, good morning. My name is Vicki Bisbee, and I'm with the Office of Management and Finance and Risk Management, Senior Claims Analyst there, processing workers' comp claims. And I've been processing the claim for Jerry Heidi. He's a retired firefighter, and I've been working with Lynn Vu on this claim
and we have processed this ordinance together. So I'd like to introduce Lynn Vu for more information on this particular ordinance.
Hi, Lynn.
Hi there. Thank you, Vicki. Hi, commissioners, and thanks for having me here today. As you said, President Mapps, I am a senior deputy city attorney. I've been asked to talk about item 778, which is a settlement involving one of the city's now retired firefighters. This firefighter has an accepted workers' compensation claim that is currently in open status, meaning that the city has an obligation to provide benefits for a work-related health condition. Some of those benefits might include temporary disability benefits, permanent disability benefits, survivors benefits. In lieu of going through the state prescribed process for assessing and determining the extent of those benefits, the parties have agreed to settle the claim and provide a lump sum payment of those benefits. And that's what's reflected in the settlement here today. That is the gist of it. I'm happy to address any specific questions you might have.
Colleagues, do you have any questions? Megan, do we have any public testimony?
No one signed up.
Okay, since we have no questions or comments here, Megan, please, and this is an emergency ordinance, Megan, please call the roll.
Hardesty,
Aye.
Rubio,
Aye.
Ryan,
Aye.
Maps.
Aye. And with that, the item passes. Megan, I believe that takes care of business for us today. Is that correct?
It does. Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues. We are adjourned.
Recording
thank you very much.
stopped.
You guys are easy to work with.